Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Is there a safe way to interact with a poltergeist? Is the nature of paranormal events changing? Well, okay. And also, my fourth question that is not in the script, how old is Ben today?
Who knows?
It's his birthday, anyway. Greetings and welcome to the 583rd broadcast of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. I'm Paul, and those are my questions, I guess. And I'm here with my son, Ben, who is 23 today.
Oh, yes, I am. I have reached level 23.
Yes. This evening we bring you a wide-ranging discussion with a distinguished guest who has never been on the show before, and we welcome your calls. It's 800-449-1240 from anywhere in the U.S. or Canada, 401-766-1240 locally. Also, we will monitor Paul at BehindTheParanormal.com for emails. Tim R. Swartz is an Indiana native and an Emmy Award-winning television producer and videographer. He's the author of a number of co-author of a number of popular books, including The Lost Journals of Nikola Tesla, America's Strange and Supernatural History, UFO Repeaters, which has an entire chapter on 1240 radio personality and UFO pioneer Joe Ferrier, Secret Black Projects, Time Travel, a how-to guide, and several more. He is contributing writer for a number of other books and to many magazines. An Emmy Award-winning photojournalist, Tim has investigated paranormal phenomena and other mysteries from such diverse locations as the Great Pyramid in Egypt to the Great Wall of China. He has worked with television networks such as PBS, ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, ESPN, and Thames TV, and the BBC. He also has appeared on the History Channel's program Ancient Aliens and the History Channel's Latin America series Contacto Extraterrestre. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Tim also writes and edits the online newsletter Conspiracy Journal, a free weekly online, email newsletter considered essential reading by paranormal researchers worldwide. Tim co-hosts the webcast program The Outer Edge, heard on PSN Radio and theouteredge.com. His main website, conspiracyjournal.com.
So Tim Swartz, welcome to Behind the Paranormal.
Well, thank you very much, guys. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. So, Tim, you're a Renaissance man, so it's kind of hard to know where to start with you. So let's begin with some common ground here between you and my dad, and that is Poltergeists.
Mm-hmm.
You and my dad were on a radio panel together last month. It was last month. Yeah, it was last month. On Tim Beckley's show, Unraveling the Secrets. And you talked about how you interacted with a stone-throwing poltergeist. So what's the story there?
Yeah, it actually was a stone-dropping poltergeist rather than tossing stones around. This thing was dropping him from the ceiling of a house in Springfield, Ohio, which is a little town just a little bit north and east of Dayton. I worked there. I worked in Dayton at a television station. This took place in 1984, and there had been all over the news that previous spring the Columbus, Ohio poltergeist case, which there was a really great book written about it a couple of years ago called Unleashed. And our station was contacted by this couple, elderly couple who lived in this house in Springfield, and they said that their house was haunted too. They had seen, all the reports about the Columbus, Ohio case, and they, were wanting to know if the same thing was happening to them. They did not want any publicity, though.
Good idea.
And I can't say as I blame them. I mean, if anybody is familiar with what happened to the Columbus, Ohio poltergeist case, I mean, that became a media circus. And I should know because I was there when it was going on.
Mm-hmm.
So the assignment editor knew that I was interested in this kind of stuff, so he told me about it, and I contacted these people, and I told them, that I was interested in looking into the case, what was going on there, but I promised that this wasn't going to end up on television or anything like that. I was just I was just interested. I wanted to come over and see what was going on. So I was able to take my television equipment with me, which in that time it was a 3/4 inch camera deck and just a bunch of batteries as well as big NiCad batteries, and went over to their place, a little ranch-style house. I mean, nothing to distinguish. I mean, it wasn't, like this, a Gothic mansion with bats flying out of the attic or anything like that. Just a normal little farmhouse, just out in the middle of a cornfield. And what had happened was that about a month or two previously, this couple adopted, or really it was an official adoption, but their 2 grandchildren came to live with them because unfortunately both their parents were in jail, and it was a boy around 10 years old and then a girl who was 12. And shortly after these kids moved in, then the poltergeist activity started. It started out with knocks on the wall, raps on the furniture. Things started to move around and disappear, show up at other places. Whispering voices, just from all over the house. I mean, they could hear people. It sounded like people talking in one room, and when they would go into that room, there was nothing there, but then the voices moved to another room. And it was kind of like a cat and mouse game. They would follow these voices around, but the voices always managed to stay just a step ahead of them. And, it was a situation where they could never tell just exactly what the voices were saying, but they knew, I mean, it sounded like, people having a conversation. So when I went over there with my equipment, almost as soon as I got into the house, all the batteries that I had with me for my video equipment died.
Well, that's common. Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, and in 1984, I mean, this wasn't something that was widely known. So I mean, I was pretty shocked. And I mean, we're talking about these were NiCad batteries. You had one that went onto the back of the camera, and then another one that went into the actual tape deck, which, you had to sling across your shoulder. And then I also had a battery belt that would run, we called it a sun gun. This was big old light that went on top of the camera. And it was dead as well. And I mean, they weren't new batteries, but they were fully charged when I got there. And, each one would last, maybe a couple of hours of continuous work. Every one of them was dead. And naturally, I didn't bring a still camera, like a Polaroid or anything like that. I trusted my video equipment. I mean, it never let me down before, but this time it sure did. So I took notes and, was sitting around, talking to these people. We were in the living room. It was probably about 6 o'clock in the evening, and this would have been in August of 1984, so it was still light outside. And all of a sudden, we heard an extremely loud bang. That's the only way I could describe it, and you could almost feel the house shake from it. And the wife said, "Oh, it's going to start." And then all of a sudden, from the middle of the ceiling, little rocks started to appear and fall to the floor. Now there wasn't there wasn't a light or anything in the middle of the ceiling. It was just just a regular. Now I think about it, I think it was like like you call it a popcorn ceiling. With that kind of plaster, on it. But these little rocks, just you could see them. They were white, maybe a little less than an inch in diameter, and they would just appear. It looked like maybe about an inch below the ceiling and then fall to the floor. And this went on for a couple of minutes, got like maybe 6 or 7 of them. And, I mean, we just sat there. And, it's one of these situations where, you always say, oh, well, if I see something strange happening, I'm just immediately going to get up and, grab my camera and all that. No. We just sat there and just kind of stared at it with our mouths hanging open, so much for, the illustrious ghost hunters, we were. But after they fell to the floor, I walked over and I picked them up, and, my memory says that the rocks were warm to the touch. They weren't hot, but they felt to me that they were a little bit warmer than they should have been.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got the idea. I remember reading a story by Ivan T. Sanderson, who had a similar experience one time. So I took a magic marker and I marked each one of these rocks with an X. And then I went to the back door, and they had a small backyard, and then almost immediately behind the house was a cornfield. And being in August, the corn was really high at this point. So I took every one of these rocks and I just chucked them one at a time into this cornfield. Shut the door, came, sat back down on the couch again. Almost immediately, the phenomena started again, little rocks falling from the ceiling. It was the very same rocks that I had marked with an X coming back.
I love that story. See, you profoundly impressed me when we were on Tim Beckley's show, Tim, because you're not only your outstanding background and the length of experience with this, but you have your feet on the ground, and I respect that. And so that's one of the reasons we asked you to start with that story. Also, because that has never happened to me. My worst poltergeist case was 10 years before that, and just about everything happened except the rock thing. But that is relatively common. It's a good thing there weren't any boulders, I suppose. Now, let me ask you something I didn't have a chance to ask you on Tim's show. Mm-hmm. These rocks, were they roughly the same size, and what sort of rocks were they?
They're limestone.
Limestone, okay.
Yeah, the same kind of rocks that, at least here in the Midwest.
Very soft rock, then.
Yeah, relatively so. I mean, they're used quite a bit in driveway. Driveway rock is what we would call it too. And in fact, the very same kind of rocks were outside in their driveway.
Okay.
I mean, I have the very same rocks right now in my driveway. They're very ubiquitous, in this area, to use. So I mean, that's I surmise that's where they came from, because they looked almost exactly like the rocks that you'd find that you found in their front yard and everybody else's front yard in the area.
Mm-hmm. What was the outcome of that case? I have read about it, but right after that incident, I kept in contact with them for a little while, because a few months later in October, I got another job in Indianapolis and moved there. But I maintained, contact with them, and they told me that after that situation, that the phenomena died down considerably and then eventually just went away. It was almost like it used up all of its energy at that point. I mean, it never was, what you would call a spectacular poltergeist case. I would say it was if you could call poltergeist cases common, this one seemed to be fairly common. There never was any, really violent activity. Nobody was thrown around the house or sucked into a television or anything like that. But it did seem like that after that incident, everything calmed down considerably, which, because I talked to them quite a bit and explained to them what we knew at the time generally happened with poltergeist cases. I wondered if that may not have had something to do with it, because they were pretty freaked out when I first got there. But then after I told them that usually these types of cases don't last that long, that they just kind of peter out after a while, and that you're not dealing with like demons or the devil or anything like that. That nobody really knows, but there are some explanations. And I think that they were just kind of relieved
that that first of all, somebody was listening to them and not making fun of them.
Mm-hmm.
And and they were able to talk about what was going on. But I mean, before I talked to them, they kept it a secret. They hadn't told anybody about it. And and also the kids, they learned to accept their situation, that they were going to be living with grandma and grandpa for a while, and I think that helped the atmosphere as well.
One thing that you said earlier that really caught my attention was that other people called you saying that they were having similar things, or at least one other person called you and said they were having something similar. I wish that back in the 70s, when I was doing a lot of poltergeist stuff, that I had known then what I at least suspect now, and that's something that Ben and I work on a lot, which is these things affecting an entire area. Never assuming that it's just one family or one house, and looking at it in a broader perspective. Now, the fellow who wrote the book on that Bridgeport case I referred to in '74, Bill Hall, World's Most Haunted House, later on, and when he was working on the book a few years ago, actually uncovered evidence of surrounding houses having issues as well, but not daring to say anything because the press was all over the Lindley Street house, at the behest of Ed Warren. So they didn't want that kind of chaos. But have you found in subsequent cases, whether it be UFOs or any paranormal work at all, or anywhere in the world where you've been, and want to get into that too in a minute, that things tend to be more widespread than suspected, or has that come up?
Oh, definitely. I know exactly what you're talking about. Now, the case in Springfield that we were just referring to, these people, their nearest neighbor was probably about a mile away. So it wasn't a situation where if there was anything going on, it could have spread other places. However, there have been situations, and I know that Tim Beckley has said the same thing, but I have gone to investigate, say, like a UFO sighting over a neighborhood, and there was one particular family who had made this report, and when I went and talked to neighbors, I ran into just all kinds of unusual reports of paranormal activity. People across the street, they said that they had a ghost in their house that had been there for a couple of years. And this was, this was just like a normal house. Not that old. They'd been the only family living there, but they kept saying that there was a little boy who was in the basement. They'd go down the basement, and they'd see, like a little boy standing in the shadows.
Yeah.
And then here in Indiana, I investigated a series of Bigfoot sightings near Vincennes, Indiana, which sits along the Wabash River, right next to Illinois. And at the same time that people were seeing some kind of a Bigfoot-type creature, other people were reporting UFO activity.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, there does seem to be some kind of connection, correlation. I don't know. I don't know what you would call it, but any time that I have investigated one type of unusual phenomena, you can just put even money on that there is something else going on in the nearby vicinity. Yeah,
certainly agreed.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that kind of makes me feel simpatico with you is that we're both journalists, and I was a newspaper man for many years. I'm still a magazine editor, and I like to think that trains you to be somewhat objective, although some of our broadcast colleagues, I wonder about that sometimes, but nevertheless, it does imply that you are certainly a trained observer, and that deserves respect as well. So let's move on to Egypt. What were you doing at the Great Pyramids, and what was cooking over there?
Well, when I was working in Indianapolis, I worked for the public television station there, and they had, as with a lot of public television stations, they had a for-profit arm that they would basically hire us out to, say you had a network that was coming into town to cover a story, and rather than bringing their own crew with them, they would go and hire, local crews. And so we did a lot of that, and we did a lot of work for a national broadcasted show called The Morning Agriculture Report, and it's exactly how it sounds. One of these shows that would be on like at 5:30 in the morning, and it was geared towards farmers. Mm-hmm. It'd talk about like hog futures and things like that. But they also did just a huge amount of international travel, and so I was fortunate to be able to travel for over like about a 5-year period to practically almost every country in the world for this. So it got to the point where if I knew ahead of time, and sometimes I didn't, if I knew ahead of time that I was going to be going to a particular country, I'd reach out to people that I would know in that country who had similar interests of my own when it came to the world of the weird, as I call it, so I could look into stuff. And one situation was at the in Cairo and at the Giza Plateau. And we looked into a couple of different things. One of the main things that we looked at was we had gotten some reports from people who said that they had elevated experiences in the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid. And when I say by elevated experiences, I mean that it would almost be like a psychedelic experience. They would go in there, and they'd be say like with a tour group, and just all of a sudden it was like they had been dosed with LSD or something along those lines. And some of these people came out changed. I mean, it was like a religious or a spiritual and mystical experience. And this coming from people who, had no previous interest or knowledge of any of this kind of thing, and they would come out just like extremely changed. And so when I went in there, we basically bribed some officials to let us go in there early in the morning before it was open for tourists, and I actually I laid down in the they call it a sarcophagus. It's not. I mean, it's just like a granite box there in the Grand Chamber, the King's Chamber. And it's got like a corner broken out of it. Nobody really knows exactly, what it was for. And when I laid down in that chamber, I had an experience that, to this day, I still haven't quite come to terms with it, where I lived another life in about less than a 30 seconds in real time. It seemed to me that I lived an entire life in ancient Egypt, and it comes back to me in bits and pieces about it. But I'm still in the process of trying to chronicle the whole situation, because when they pulled me out of there, I was just, it was like that I had been shocked with electricity directly to my brain.
Very interesting.
That's the way I described it, yeah.
Well, we're going to take our bottom of the hour break here, and I want to continue the conversation about this experience in the Great Pyramid, and we'll be right back. You're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON 1240 in New England's beautiful but rainy Blackstone River Valley. We'll be right back.
It's your business. The health of our economy, the strength of our businesses affects every individual, every family. I'm Frank Prosnick. Each Thursday, we'll visit with leaders to discuss important business and economic issues. Join me Thursdays at 4 p.m. on WOON. It's your business because it is.
ON Radio, ON Worldwide.
Okay, welcome back, and we're going to talk about our charities at the end of the show because I want to we're burning up the hour here with Tim Swartz, and I want to get on with it. Now, Tim, before we burn up the hour, would you please tell us about your websites, your books, where people can find out more about you, and let's take care of that before we have a chance not to.
Sure, yeah. My website is conspiracyjournal.com, and I'll say it again, conspiracyjournal.com. And I put this together along with Tim Beckley and Global Communications. We've had this site up since I think around like 1996. I mean, it's been up for a long time in various different incarnations. And,
yeah, I remember. Yeah.
And from that site we also have the Conspiracy Journal newsletter. Which is a free weekly email newsletter that it's basically an aggregate of the week's weird stories. I have stringers all over the world that send me interesting stories that I then have to try to pare down to about 7 or 8 per issue. And if anyone's interested, they can sign up for free and get that email and get the newsletter. And I tell you something. I mean, it's we've been doing it for years and years now, and it just keeps growing in popularity.
I remember receiving it for years and years myself. Tim Beckley is a dear friend of both Tim's and ours, and he's been on our show many times. Most recently, he came all the way up from New York to on the train. We picked him up, and he came to the station his last appearance on this station was 50 years ago with Joe Ferrier, whom we mentioned as being one of the major figures in UFO Repeaters, which has just come out. So we'll promote that a little bit later on. But thanks, Tim, and it's really good stuff. And Tim's style is kind of unique, but he's a great asset to and one of the earliest UFO researchers there. So okay, so let's. I had a question about the Great Pyramid experience. It reminds me of something that I call the flashing nexus. And I amazed my son on one show a couple of years ago by bringing that, because we'd never discussed that before. It's often, at least when I've run into it, it's often part of the near-death experience, or at least the out-of-the-body experience, where people feel that there's someone else. I have several near-death experiences where people said that they were, all of a sudden they were the nurse, or they were the doctor, or they were somebody in another room, and it was as real as anything. And our explanation, for what it's worth, is that they're experiencing parallel lives in the quantum multiverse, or in the quantum hologram, however you want to describe that. So what say you about that sort of thing and the experience you had? Do you know who you were or when you were? Yeah,
it's... and I haven't, I haven't really talked about this experience very much. I've never written about it.
Well, then we're honored to have you talking about it on the show.
Well, because a lot of the memory that I have of it is still, it's still just fragments. And plus, it's a personal experience, and I don't want to, muddy the waters with my own, investigations and stuff by talking about this too much. But I had the feeling that it was a life that was going on right now in parallel to my current life, but I didn't have the feeling that that how do I put it, that I was that person. It was more like I was having this person's experience at the same time. I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh no, yeah, it does. Yeah,
but I don't feel like, it's like you said, I don't feel like that it was taking place in the past, even though it was an ancient Egyptian setting. I'm like you. I mean, I have the impression that time exists all together, so to speak. Past, present, and future all exist at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So I had the feeling that I was experienced what we refer to as the past, but actually, it's more like a parallel timeline with our own. But I had the feeling that not like a pharaoh or anybody high up or anything like that. It seemed like that this was a person that was a fairly low muckety muck, but working with stone. And a lot of it was taking place like within a hut, and just constantly chipping away at rocks and stones, making shapes that were then picked up, and then I would start on the next one. It's from what I can remember, it was fairly a fairly mundane experience.
Well, as long as none of the stones fell on you, as they might have in that house in Ohio, right?
Yeah.
So, all right.
These were a fairly good size, but we're not talking about like the 3-ton ones or anything.
Well, that's reassuring.
Ben,
did you have any questions? I'm running through here because I'm so excited about the conversation.
Oh, I know. I'm working on some. Don't worry about it.
Okay. All right. Now, Tim, let's go back to how did you first get involved in this field?
Mm-hmm. Well, I never was. A lot of people, they'll tell you, I was interested in this kind of stuff ever since I was a little kid.
That's the standard bio.
Yeah. Well, there really wasn't for me. It wasn't until sometime in elementary school when I was given an assignment by the teacher about flying saucers. There was a UFO flap going on in the United States at the time. And our class periodically we were given like news events to write about and then do the presentation in front of the class. And so mine was about flying saucers. I'd never heard of flying saucers before, and not really that interested. So I gave my report, and I was then dubbed like the flying saucer guy. I was the guy who, I was the kid that, that I believed in Martians and little green men and all that, and it stuck. It stuck.
Mm-hmm.
But the interesting thing that got me started then on this was that, people would go and, like make fun of you to your face and, in front of everybody else, but then they'd come back to you later and they'd say, I don't believe in this stuff, and then, they would tell me about, like a UFO that they saw or that their house was haunted or something along those lines.
Yeah, that's happened to us with healthcare professionals. I remember addressing a group of psychiatrists, and I mentioned, I wonder if, having worked in psychiatric hospitals as a seminary student and as a grad student, are these people really, say, schizophrenic, or are they experiencing worlds that really do exist and that we can't see?
Mm-hmm.
And their eyes would turn red and the steam would come out of the ears. But then they'd come up afterwards privately and say, I suspected the same thing, but I don't want to say that or else I'll get fired,
Right.
That kind of thing. So I hear you really, on situations such as that. So what about the Great Wall of... Oh, Ben's got a question.
I do have a question, actually. Well, actually, this is more of a question to save for the end, so I'll let you continue with your cross-examination.
All right. What about the Great Wall of China, Tim? What was going on over there?
Well, the Great Wall of China, again, this was a situation where we were on a trip with various government, United States government agriculture executives, and so I contacted some people I knew in China. Just to see if there's anything interesting going on, and sure enough, there at the Great Wall, and there's just about an hour drive outside of Beijing. There is like the typical tourist spot where you can access the Great Wall. That's the spot where they've done most of the major reconstruction, and it's absolutely beautiful and awesome sight. Well, what they don't tell you is that that area is also extremely haunted. there have been multiple sightings throughout the years of specters of various different kinds. One of them, and the one that I really took interest in, was somebody on horseback who was wearing what appeared to be, like maybe 14th, 15th century, like a Mongolian warrior outfit, riding a horse up and down the Great Wall, right in that middle section. And so we went out there early in the morning. Again, it's amazing. It was a little bit more difficult with the Chinese officials to let them to allow me to go there with my video camera, because a lot of these places, if you have a professional video camera, you have to pay an exorbitant fee because they think you're from Hollywood or someplace like that, and that you're going to make a bunch of money off of them. So I convinced them that wasn't the case. I mean, it was just a little news guy. Paid him a little bit of money, and we were able to actually go up to this area where reportedly, people were hearing and seeing this guy on horseback riding up and down, and we actually heard ourselves the sound of horse hooves. We didn't see anything, but I tell you something. This was one of these situations. The sun was coming up. I mean, it was really quiet where we were. The birds, chirping. It's a beautiful morning, and you could hear, like the clip clop of horse hooves up and down on the stone where we were, and then the most bizarre thing about it is that sound did not make it onto the videotape. I was shooting. Everything worked fantastic. I mean, we were like high-fiving each other. Yes, we got this. When we went back, all you could see, I mean, it was just us saying, wow, did you hear that? Did you hear that? And none of it was on the audio track of videotape. Well,
if I had a nickel for every time that's happened to me, I wouldn't have to do this. So
I tell you something, it floored me.
Yeah.
Because you could hear it so clearly, and you could it was almost like you could feel it.
Yeah, I hear you.
In the pavement underneath, but none of it made it, on the audio track.
That's it. We have an email from Peter in Albany, New York, and Peter wants to know, in your work as a UFO investigator, have you worked with abductees, and what do you feel is the alien agenda? A little bit different from what we've been talking about.
I have worked with some abductees, and I'm extremely cautious about the whole experience because so many people have been influenced by the media that it's really become difficult to distinguish somebody who may be just having some kind of wish fulfillment type of situation, which is extremely strange to think because a lot of abductees have had not very good experiences. When it comes to the whole idea of as they say, what was it, like the alien agenda? I am not convinced that the UFO phenomena is entirely nuts and bolts extraterrestrial.
Nor am I.
Yeah, I think that and from my own experiences, there is a very definite paranormal part to UFOs. There could very well be nuts and bolts spacecraft, visiting us from other planets, other dimensions, maybe even time travels. But I don't think that the entire answer to the UFO phenomena is extraterrestrials. And it always, it always kind of gets me a bit when I'm reading a book about UFOs, when the author refers to them constantly as spaceships.
Right.
It's just like, where do you get that from? I mean, we're talking about UFOs, unidentified flying objects. They're, as far as you know, they're not spaceships. You're putting your own opinion in that, whether it be, unconsciously or not. That's not the case as far as I'm concerned. So.
Well,
I don't know if I answered that question or just more danced around it a little bit, but
no, that's a good answer.
That's a pretty good answer. Well, so that sort of leads into a question I have, which is you seem to be sort of in the same sort of area of agreement as my dad and myself are, in that it's hard to tell where we're going in the sphere of the paranormal. How do you? Well, let me put this in the form of a question. How do you feel about where the paranormal research area is going? Like, do you think it's getting more overly influenced by the media? It's getting too ridiculous, and all the serious people are drowned out. Or do you think that some of the seriousness is actually coming through, and people are starting to really, grasp onto that?
Well, it's a little from column A and a little from column B. I think that more people have been exposed to the paranormal and the whole idea of UFOs and Bigfoot, things like that, from these reality shows that have become so predominant. Unfortunately, that also tends to muddy the waters. And it allows people who are trying to put across the hoax to do it a little bit more easier, because some of this knowledge has become a lot more common. I'm happy to see that people have become more aware of what's actually going on, in this universe. That there's more, that there's more than just what you see and feel in front of you. Then again, the whole pop culture attitude of it is, it's unfortunately it's always been this case. But then it kind of makes it a joke, and something that. Like, let's get the Ouija board out, and we'll call it, the spirits of the dead, and all that. And definitely, none of this stuff. I mean, looking for UFOs or ghosts or what have you is it can be dangerous.
Yes.
I always tell people, like, what can I do, to go and find a ghost or to see a UFO or call them down, and I always tell them, don't, don't invite this stuff.
Yeah, you're one of the few people, along with myself, who said that. I was addressing a group in 2006, I think it was, in Florida, which was a group, I was speaking against my better judgment at a conference for beginning ghost hunters, right? And they said, if you have, Paul, if you have one word of advice, what would it be? I said, don't. I said just what you said. I don't. And 230 people stared at me, and I said, however, here we all are. So, my presentation was all about caution and what you could be dealing with. I mean, you cannot approach that as if it were stamp collecting.
Nope.
And that's the problem, hobbyist stuff,
which seems to dominate pretty much a majority of the area. Or they're attempting to prove to materialistic science that these things do exist.
Well, but they don't even talk to each other, let alone peer review or any sort of academic discipline.
Well, I mean,
it's not there.
Well, it's working against itself. It's like a big paradox, attempting to prove something that is almost impossible to replicate to a materialistic science that is extremely empirical.
Yeah, it's extremely narrow, really.
Exactly. It's almost like an illogical move to even join a group like that.
Well, all that said, Tim, what's your opinion on our impression, which may or may not be valid, that there seem to be more paranormal phenomena being recorded, or at least reported, and that it tends to be a little bit more negative? Now, granted, the caveat there is that we have an information society. Everybody knows everything. The internet is everywhere. Do you think that initial statement is true, that there's more paranormal phenomena and that perhaps it's more negative, or we just know about these things more readily than we used to?
I don't think that there has been a change or an increase or anything like that. It's like you said. I mean, we now live in a mass media, immediate 24-hour news information societies, and it's especially with the predominance of cameras and cell phones and things like that, people are able to record more and more of these situations, and I think that because of the media bringing attention to this stuff, in a popular fashion, that people have become more aware that this stuff actually exists. I mean, it used to be that, and I would say that probably 99% to 100% of people have had some kind of unusual experience in their life, but because in the past they had no frame of reference to what had happened to them, and no way to describe it, and plus they don't want to describe it because they're afraid of being thought of crazy and made fun of. Nobody would talk about it. Now it's become a lot more socially acceptable to talk about these things, and in fact, a lot of people clamor to have these experiences and get it on Facebook or on television or whatever. And as for more negative aspects of it, I think it has remained the same. It's a matter of perception.
Yes.
If you go into an experience like that with the idea that you're dealing with evil spirits or demons or anything like that, then the phenomena is going to, it's almost like wish fulfillment. It's going to go in that direction. That was always one of the main things that I had against the Warrens. They would always go into a case, and I mean, they'd go in and say, "Yep, you got demons here." Well, then naturally the phenomena starts acting that way. And I've found that time and time again that if you go into a situation saying that, oh well, there's nothing horrible going on here, it's going to go and peter out after a while, then that tends to be the case. If you go in saying, oh my God, there are demons and evil spirits here and it's going to last for years and years, well, hey, oddly enough, that's what happens.
No, I think there's a lot of truth to that, and I saw it in my own eyes in the cases I worked with them. They were old friends, not to malign anybody I had personal affection for, but you couldn't deny what you just said. I think it's certainly true. Tim, on the issue of the exopolitics movement, the idea that we can, I think the foundational idea is that we can approach alien life, however you may define that, extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional, extra-temporal, whatever. Do you think it's sort of? I find them rather naive. And what do you say? Because I don't know if we can assume that these would treat us as equals, whoever or whatever they may be, if there's anything. I mean, what say you?
I would tend to agree. I would say that if we are dealing with an intelligence that is wanting to make contact with us, it would have done so a long time ago.
You'd think so.
I mean, people have been on this planet for millions of years, and whatever this phenomena is, whether it be extraterrestrial or what have you, it has been a part of us all this time, but it has remained somewhat in the shadows, and not a lot of times, but I would say almost all the time, is in certain ways deceptive for whatever reason. I'm not going to go and say it's deceptive because it's going to kidnap us and serve us for dessert. I mean, I don't know. There may be something going on that it's deceptive, for a good reason, or it just could be that it just doesn't care. We're just like squirrels in the backyard to them.
No, precisely. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the issue of of the name of your publication. It's always intrigued me, Conspiracy Journal, and the website conspiracyjournal.com. You don't come across as a conspiracy theorist, are you?
No, not really. I mean, we touch upon conspiracy, stuff as well. But the name actually came from Tim Beckley. He had a kind of like a catalog newsletter long before the internet, and he called it Conspiracy Journal.
I remember that. I used to get that. Yeah.
Right, and it still exists. I mean, print issue comes out every couple of years. And so we were just kind of like, musing over what we were going to call the website. And at first, I think we were going to call it like UFO News or, something kind of mundane like that. And then I said, well, why not just Conspiracy Journal? I said, that's what you've got now. Let's just go with that.
Okay. All right, very good. Well, Tim, we have a bunch of questions we'll have to save for the next show because we're almost out of time. Give us your website and your information one more time so people will be able to pick it up.
Sure. Again, our website is conspiracyjournal.com, and we have an email newsletter with the same name. You can sign up for that. Any books that I have, and I've got a bunch of them, and so does Tim Beckley. All you have to do is just go to Amazon.com and type in, like Tim Swartz, Tim Beckley, something along the line, and every one of our books will come up.
Excellent.
You can't miss them. Our most recent is UFO Repeaters, Seeing is Believing, The Camera Doesn't Lie. And then I've got one that just came out not too long ago called America's Strange and Supernatural History.
Very good. And, of course, UFO Repeaters, as we said, to repeat, so to speak, has a whole chapter on Joe Ferrier, a beloved radio talk show host in this area, this part of New England for over 50 years. And it's a great book. They're fun to read. They're big, and floppy books. You can get them in your lap. They're really great. So, Tim, what a great pleasure to have you with us, and we're going to do it again very soon.
Well, thank you very much. I had a great time tonight, and I hope your audience enjoyed it as well.
Okay, we'll be in touch off the air.
Indeed.
Okay.
Have a good one.
Okay. Okay, let's get to our announcements, folks, in our last few minutes. We had a great time at Ashworth by the Sea in Hampton Beach, New Hampshire on Saturday, April 18th, during the Northeast Parafest. We spoke on the paranormal as the background to human history, and many thanks to Tom Spitaleri and the folks from the New England Ghost Project, who organized the event to benefit the historic Hilldale Cemetery in Haverhill, Mass.
And on Saturday, September 5th, we're scheduled to speak once again at the Exeter UFO Festival in Exeter, New Hampshire. The town-wide event is organized by the Kiwanis Club to benefit local children's charities. Other speakers will be next week's guest, actually, and that is the great Stanton Friedman, along with Richard Dolan, Kathleen Marden, and Jennifer Stein, and we'll provide more information as the date approaches.
And following that, Saturday, October 10th, we'll speak again at the Greater New England UFO Conference. That's formerly the New England UFO Conference, now the Greater New England UFO Conference at City Hall in Leominster, Mass. Other speakers will include Richard Dolan, Peter Robbins, maybe Stan Friedman. We'll ask him next week if he's going to be there, and other UFO greats. Watch for more information on that event and others coming up this year.
Also, don't forget about our website where you can find that information as well as all sorts of other cool stuff, including 600 free podcasts from all of our past shows on ON 1240 and our 4.5-year run on CBS Radio and special shows and podcasts. The website is BehindTheParanormal.com.
And you can find my books there, as well as at Amazon.com and all the usual suspects, Barnes & Noble, Nook, and all that. If you order them at BehindTheParanormal.com, I will sign them for you, and you will help us keep all those podcasts free. Also, we point out on our websites there are links to the charities Ben and I have adopted, including USACares.org, Canadian Veterans Advocacy, Youth Mentoring Connection in Los Angeles, doing amazing things for at-risk youth out there, and also BuildersHelpingHeroes.org here in Rhode Island. And there are two new books we talked about on that site as well, and also with our guest this evening from Tim Beckley's publishing company. One is The Bell Witch Project, which contains a story, and also a few contributions by yours truly on that.
Okay, so next Monday on April 27th here on ON 1240 and ONWorldwide.com, nuclear physicist and grandfather of ufology, Stanton Friedman, returns to the show.
And we'll leave you this evening with a quote attributed to that old sweetheart, Albert Einstein. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough, unquote. All right, I'm Paul Eno, and we're going to be okay. All right, right. Anyway, we've got a few extra minutes here, so
we do. So
remind you again about our website, BehindTheParanormal.com, and our main website, NewEnglandGhosts.com.
And don't forget, both books that we did mention are available at Amazon.com, and don't forget about those links online at the online bookstore at our show website. That's BehindTheParanormal.com, and that's about all the time we have this evening. He is Paul Eno, I am Ben Eno, and thanks for joining us on our great cosmic journey, and we shall see you next time.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.